Today we're creating a mythical Macintosh, one that Apple named but never actually technically released. In fact, the only way to get this Mac is by way of an incredibly hard to find expansion card, which literally changes the entire architecture of the few computers it fits into. That's right, we're turning this Quadra 700 into the fabled Power Macintosh 700. And we're doing it by way of a Daystar PowerPro 601, a fantastical upgrade developed in partnership with Apple. It not only quadruples the speed of this 1991 Mac from 25 MHz to 100 MHz, but it also completely changes the architecture from 68K to PowerPC. I mean, imagine plugging a card into an Intel Mac today and magically transforming it into an M1. It's completely bonkers. Oh, and my particular card here, it's a little cursed, so we're gonna have to deal with that, with some help from a friend. So stay tuned. Now, if you've seen my previous videos on this Quadra 700, you're probably thinking, wait, you specifically said you weren't going to upgrade the processor because it was running AUX, which doesn't like processor upgrades. And you're right, this upgrade won't work with AUX at all. But I've recently been gifted an incredible machine with an interesting story behind it, which will make an even better AUX server for our multiplayer MUD at VCF East this year, which opens our 700 up for tinkering. And if you think you have an idea of what behemoth lurks under this sheet right here, put your guesses in the comments below, but make sure you stick around to the end of the video. Oh, and if you enjoy modding old Macs to preposterous levels of performance, I hope you'll consider subscribing to the channel. I have a bunch of Macintosh shenanigans just like this planned, including a trip to VCF East in October to show some of these machines off. So if you're into this kind of thing, I think it's definitely worth sticking around. The PowerPro 601 was developed by Daystar Digital under a partnership with Apple, who also sold an Apple branded version of the card. And Daystar built lots of accelerators for various Macs, although they were perhaps most famous for their forward-thinking Macintosh clones. In fact, Daystar introduced multiprocessing on the Mac through their Genesis MP Macintosh clones, which I'd love to find an example of someday. But this accelerator, this is really special. Available in several speeds, including a super interesting 80 MHz version that included onboard RAM slots for an extra 128 megs of RAM, this 100 MHz version was the fastest version ever released for these Macs. It upgraded most of the 68040 Macs in the Quadra and Centris line, who had this thin version of the processor direct slot. And the card was so popular, it even outlived the company that created it. After Daystar went out of business in 1999, arch rival Sonnet acquired many of their accelerator designs and continued selling this card as the Presto PPC all the way through 2002. Yes, that's right, people were still upgrading these 1991 Macs through 2002, which is a testament to their popularity in scientific and professional design settings. Okay, before we tear into this Quadra again, let's take a moment to thank the sponsor of today's video, Skillshare. As you've probably figured out from watching these videos, I'm not exactly a professional cinematographer. In fact, I pretty much have no idea what I'm doing when it comes to producing videos. So when Skillshare gave me access to their online learning community, I was quite impressed by the depth and breadth of content available. Everything from filmmaking to graphic design to web development. It's curated specifically for learning. There's no ads and they're always launching new premium classes, and now even live classes, so you can stay focused on learning and just follow your creativity. The first thing I did was dive into YouTube Success, Script Shoot and Edit with MKBHD, and honestly, I got a ton out of these short, hands-on lessons about planning visuals, shooting, and editing footage. Skillshare is less than $10 a month with an annual subscription, and the first 1,000 of my subscribers to click the link in the description will get a free trial of Skillshare Premium membership. And now, back to the Quadra. So I want to run some before and after benchmarks on this card and then try some real world usage to see just how much of a difference this architecture changing upgrade actually makes. But before we do, there's a bit of an obstacle. It's completely dead. Darn you, Macintosh curse! Fortunately, my friend Steve from Mac84 just so happens to be a literal wizard of Macs. I sent the card off to him to take a look at, and he immediately found problems. Not only were some of the CPU pins bent and shorted, but a large percentage of the CPU wasn't even soldered to the board anymore. He was able to painstakingly restore the card and bring it back to life. And he also found the original Daystar accelerator software and uploaded it to Macintosh Garden. I highly encourage you to check out his video about it right here, because it's a real nail biter filled with microscopic soldering and a happy ending. And I think Steve sent the card back with some extra goodies, and I thought this was really funny. Artisanally repaired by Steve of Mac84 in a Windows-free environment. That's good to know. And then he sent over this envelope of official records with a big ol' EEP on the back. And let's see what's in here. This is my second certificate of exorcism. This certifies this Daystar PowerPC upgrade card is no longer cursed. I spared no expense. So I also have another certificate for my cursed Mac, which Steve also repaired and decursed. So this is my second certificate of exorcism. And then a nice letter. I hope this Daystar PowerPC 601 upgrade card will now work happily in your Quadra 700 Jurassic Mac. Me too. Also included in the envelope is this incredibly cool Mac84 sticker, which is a color classic with the Apple rainbow colors and 84 in it, which is Steve's logo. And this is one heck of a nice sticker. So wow, I really need to up my merch game. Okay, so let's run some benchmarks before we install the upgrade card. And I'm going to use MacBench 4.0, which is a pretty good choice here because it should run no problem on 68K and PowerPC. And the baseline machine is a Power Mac 6100. And that's interesting because it has a 60 megahertz 601 processor, which is the same processor as the upgrade card has, except the upgrade card is 100 megahertz. So with the stock 25 megahertz 68040, we should fall well below the baseline system here. But when we do the upgrade, we should be significantly ahead. So it'll be interesting to see us fall on both sides of the baseline Power Mac 6100. But let's run the main test suite and see what we get. Okay, so I actually wound up setting up a custom suite of tests to run on the Quadra, mostly processor tests, but I also put a couple disk tests and graphics tests in there because I want to see how much of a difference the 100 megahertz PowerPC switch to PowerPC architecture makes with all of this stuff. So these tests took forever to finish, and as you can see, we are, well, quite laughably below the baseline Power Macintosh 6100. Our floating point is 10% of the Power Mac, and our raw processor speed is a whopping 27%. So let me save this as Quadra 68K right on the desktop. I've already got the PowerPro software thanks to Steve from Mac84, which I have on the desktop here for convenience. So let's shut down and install the upgrade. All right, well, it's once again time to do the most dangerous thing a tech YouTuber can do, and that is install thermal compound on camera. So we'll just get a small dab here on the die and hook this heatsink back on. All right, let's crack into the Quadra. The easiest computer ever made to get inside of. And the PDS slot is this slot right here. So here we go, 68K machine is now a PowerPC machine. All right, first boot with the PowerPC card. And we get a chime, that's a good sign. When I had the PowerPC card in here before, The computer didn't boot at all and sometimes made a horrible squeaking noise. Okay, so we're fully booted, and as you'll see, we're still running on the 68040 processor. And that's because we need to use the Daystar utility to switch. And let's see if we can do it. Yeah, look at that. It sees it. So currently running Quadra 700 68040 at 25 megahertz. Let's click PowerPro Startup. And changes take effect after shutdown. All right, well, here goes nothing, I suppose. Hey, we got the Power Mac chime. Did you hear that? All right, well, we're in. Let's see what Apple System Profiler says. Hey, look at that. Power Macintosh 700. This is now the mythical Power Macintosh 700. A machine that Apple named, but never technically released. And here it is, running at 100 megahertz with our PowerPC 601. And that is just such an incredible, mind-blowing upgrade because the entire architecture of the computer changed. All right, let's rerun our benchmarks. All right, well, the results are in, and oh man, what a difference. The processor scores are off the charts. I mean, it's even more of a difference than I was expecting. So our Quadra 68K is the yellow bar here for processor performance was 27% of a Power Macintosh 6160. But our Quadra PowerPC upgraded, this purple bar, is 142% of the Power Macintosh 6160. Floating point performance even more drastic. Our 68K 68040, 10% of a Power Macintosh 6160, but our Quadra PPC is 146%. That's absolutely bonkers. This computer has leapfrogged generations of Macs. This really is the equivalent of taking a first generation Intel Power Mac and plugging an M1 Mac card into it, because just look at that performance increase. Okay, so benchmarks are nice and all, but why don't we try something real world? Why don't we play a game comparing 68040 to PowerPC, say Wolfenstein 3D, and then we're going to try something completely nuts. We're going to install macOS 8.6 on here, at least I hope we are, which should never ever be able to run on a 68040, but should run just fine on this PowerPC as long as we do a couple of hacks. Okay, so we'll just have to go into PowerPro and do 68040 startup. And we do shutdown and then restart. And now we have the 68K startup chime. So I think Wolfenstein 3D is a great test here for two reasons, really. First, it's one of my favorite games of all time. And second, the macOS port is just incredibly poorly optimized. All right, so it's turning doesn't go that well. Let's check our settings here. We have screen size set to 640 by 400. We can drop it to 512 by 384. And it's still, wow, still pretty slow. The test is always opening the door. Yeah, quite slow. I mean, it's not unplayable, but it's borderline unbearable. Okay, let's shrink the screen a little bit more to 320 by 200. And there we go. A playable Wolfenstein on a tiny screen. All right, let's try it on the PowerPC. Okay, so now we're booted back into the PowerPC at 100 megahertz. And let's see what Wolfenstein is like now. Alright, no big surprise. Tiny mode works just fine. But let's see if we can blow it up to the maximum. Alright, not too bad. Oh, well, a little slower than I would like, actually. That's unfortunate. Oh yeah, the door is slow. Fails the door test, in my opinion. Not unplayable, but borderline unbearable. All right, let's shrink it down one setting to 640 by 400 for a nice cinematic feel with black bars at the top and bottom. Oh yeah, now it's much better. Alright, well, at this size, it's perfectly playable and fairly smooth. Not perfectly smooth, but perfectly fine. And I will definitely play it at this resolution. So maybe not the perfect Wolfenstein 3D machine, but still pretty darn cool. Okay, now before we can install 8.6, we have to do two things. One, obviously we need to Druaga 1 our CD-ROM drive and dangle it out the side again. But also we need to install something called Wish I Were, which is a control panel which lets us spoof the Gestalt ID of the system so that it makes sense when OS 8.6 tries to detect what system it's installing on, because by default it won't let you install on obviously Quadra 700 because it knows that's not compatible. And I believe it doesn't understand what a Power Macintosh 700 is. So we have our anthropomorphic zip drive up here with googly eyes. And I have my trusty Whatnot zip disk, and I've put Wish I Were on here. So let's install that now. Okay, so Wish I Were is an extension and a control panel that we have to install to the system folder, which will do all of the magic for us. So within the Wish I Were control panel, we can change the Gestalt ID here to something pre-built in. And we'll change it to something close to what this is already. So we'll do a Power Mac 8100-100 so that 8.6 knows it's installing on a 100 megahertz processor, and other software might get confused when it's trying to configure itself based on Gestalt ID processor speed. Let's restart and see if that took effect. All right, Apple System Profiler. And there we go. We are a Power Macintosh 8100 100 megahertz for all intents and purposes. Let's try to install 8.6. And we'll once again use this Apple CD 300 Plus that I liberated out of my broken LC575. And I'll just have to fit in this other SCSI cable with more connections, since this only has a tiny little one connection cable in there by default. Perfect. All right, let's pop in the CD and see if it just lets us install. Well, so far so good. Click Start to install macOS 8.6 on Mac SD. Oh my god, I think it's working. Well, I guess we'll jump cut to when this does whatever it does. All right, the installation has finished. Let's restart the system. Alright, well that's annoying. The startup disk will not work on this Macintosh model. Use the latest installer to update the disk for this model. Huh. Okay, so after a little bit of research, we have to do some additional hackery here with ResEdit. And we're going to have to hack up the system folder here for 8.6. So let me make a copy of this as a backup. And now let's ResEdit system. So I just have to find the GUSD. And then I need to find 001F, 001C, which is here. And I'll need to change this to 0074, 001C. So we'll save that, quit out of here, and let's give this another shot. Hey, we did it! Check it out! 8.6 is booting on our Quadra 700. Alright, well here we are, booted into 8.6. I mean, that's incredible. Unfortunately, it's a bit slow, probably perfectly usable. Alright, and now that we're on 8.6, we should be able to do something really cool and run a reasonably modern web browser. So I have the final version of Classilla here, which is a mostly modern build of Firefox, which unfortunately has been discontinued. So 9.3.4 beta, I believe, is the final full version, but it should run on macOS 8.6. Let's see what it can do. All right, let's see if Classilla can load some websites. Okay, so I don't think this is going to work. I actually left, walked to the store, picked up food, ate dinner, and then came back here, and it's been at least an hour, and the computer isn't frozen, but Classilla is still on starting up here. So it definitely was just a gimmick even to see if it worked. I mean, you're not going to be browsing modern websites at 100 megahertz, but yeah, I don't think Classilla is going to work here. Okay, so that'll do it for these newly PowerPC'd Quadra shenanigans. And this is just such a cool computer. I mean, I've always wanted a Quadra 700 and I never thought I would actually have one. And now it's upgraded to really the absolute maximum that it possibly could be. It has a full complement of video RAM thanks to Silicon Insider in France. It has maxed out regular memory at 68 megs, and now it has the 100 megahertz Daystar PowerPC upgrade card, which just completely transforms this machine into a completely different monster. So if you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more Macintosh shenanigans like this, please subscribe down below, and thank you very much for watching. Alright, ready for it? Here we go! And a special thanks to Stig124, Justin, Greg, Chris, and Sorta Eclectic, who are my highest tiered patrons and all of my Patreon supporters for helping to make these shenanigans possible.